Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, the escalating tension across the Korean Peninsula. U.S. Defense Secretary General Jim Mattis adds his voice, sending out a warning and a call to Pyongyang to stand down. We'll get you up to speed on the global crisis. Plus, my wide-ranging exclusive interview with Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg, the 10-year veteran on sending out a call to action for working women and holding companies accountable to commitments to their employees. And the moment of truth for Snap as Wall Street looks to turn the page on its unsatisfying first quarter. What investors expect from the second quarter report card on Thursday as the Snapchat parent fights to fend off copycats. First, to our lead. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is trying to smooth things over after President Trump threatened to unleash fire and fury against North Korea. Earlier today, Tillerson told reporters that Trump was sending North Korea's leader a message in a language Kim Jong-un would understand. Tillerson added that he doesn't feel there is an imminent threat from North Korea. Meantime, in Washington, it was reported that the FBI raided the Northern Virginia home of Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, 2 weeks ago in an effort to find tax and foreign banking records. Joining me now to discuss, Bloomberg's national political reporter, Sahil Kapoor, in Washington. So, Sahil, first, let's start with North Korea. There are a slew of bad options here. What do you think is the most likely way this plays out?
Well, this is a problem that we know has bedeviled the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, the Obama administration. Nobody has quite figured out a way to deal with North Korea because they're so isolated from the world. Economic sanctions have only a limited impact on them. And, that's been done over and over again. Meanwhile, they have this massive military apparatus and a somewhat erratic and unpredictable leader. So it's hard to know how this plays out. There are no great solutions here beyond simply containing them and preventing them from acting in a more belligerent way, which is what Secretary of Defense James Mattis said today. The White House spent much of the day walking back President Trump's rhetoric yesterday, the fire and fury like the world has never seen before, quote, essentially saying it was off the cuff, he was improvising, and that language had not been vetted. It's a pretty spectacular thing to see the White House saying, the president's words in this regards should not be taken quite so seriously.
So when it comes to Paul Manafort and this FBI raid on his home, the day after he spoke with members of the Intelligence Committee, how big a red flag did they see? Is it a sign that they don't trust him?
It's a sign that this investigation into him is very serious. The Washington Post reported that the raid happened late last month. It wasn't leaked. Mueller hadn't, disclosed exactly what he was going for. It seems like the work of a serious investigator who's not operating in the public eye but wants to get all the information he can. The Post had reported that there were search warrants involved and they seized a bunch of information from his house. So it sounds like they have a pretty specific purpose here. Beyond that, a lot of this is unknown, I think, to the public, specifically what the investigators have in mind and what they're going for. But yes, it absolutely sounds serious.
All right, and more harsh words from the president himself for Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. President Trump tweeting, Senator Mitch McConnell and I had excessive expectations, but I don't think so. After 7 years of hearing repeal and replace, why not done? What do you make of yet another public attack here from the president on a key Washington lawmaker?
I think it's more significant than most of the president's prior attacks on Republicans. This is Mitch McConnell, the Senate Republican leader, the man he needs to get pretty much any piece of legislation through and out to his desk. It's unusual to see Trump and McConnell going at each other like this. It's not happened. McConnell has so far only offered the gentlest of critiques about the president, and that has been with regard to his Twitter feed. He doesn't like the president's tweets, he said over and over again, because it distracts from the message and the priorities that the Congress wants to do. This time, McConnell took it a little further and portrayed President Trump as a political novice who doesn't quite understand the way things move in Congress and the fact that things need time to happen. And he accused the president of overinflating expectations, which is why you have a 200-day mark right now where President Trump does not have a major legislative achievement to brag about. The Obamacare repeal bill, at least a stripped-down version of it, failed in the Senate by a single vote. And everybody's trying to point fingers. McConnell's trying to explain why his Senate wasn't able to get that done. And the House House is pointing the finger at the Senate. The president's got to answer for it as well. So this is some ratcheting up that is unhelpful to Republicans if they want to get big things done in the rest of the year, like infrastructure and maybe like taxes.
All right, McConnell, exactly what he said on Monday. Our new president, of course, has not been in this line of work before, and I think he had excessive expectations about how quickly things happen in the democratic process. Bloomberg's Sahil Kapoor with us from Washington. Sahil, thanks so much for that update. Well, the ex-Google engineer fired this week over his 3,300-word memo on gender differences, and the tech industry has made his first public comments. James Damore spoke with YouTube chat show host Stéphane Molyneux. In an interview posted online, he discussed the reasons behind the memo.
I mean, a lot of this came from me seeing some of the problems in our culture at Google, where a lot of people that weren't in this groupthink just felt totally isolated and alienated. And so there were many people that came to me and just said, yeah, I'm thinking of leaving Google because this is getting so bad. And so I really thought it was a problem that Google itself had to fix.
Now, Facebook's COO, Sheryl Sandberg, addressed the memo on her Facebook page. She wrote, "Inequality in tech isn't due to gender differences. It's due to cultural stereotypes that persist. We all need to do more." You will hear more from Sandberg later in this hour. Our exclusive conversation with her, we will cover the culture wars brewing within the tech industry. And speaking of Facebook, coming up, the company is bolstering its efforts to combat hate speech. We'll discuss the tech giant's latest move and its possible impact next. This is Bloomberg. Facebook is doubling down on its efforts to combat hate speech. The social media giant said it is adding 500 content control staff in Germany, this amid pressure in the country to crack down on offensive posts. Germany's parliamentary lower house recently passed legislation threatening fines of up to $59 million. That fine would be levied on large social networks that fail to let users report hate speech or to remove illegal postings. Joining us now, Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde in London, and with me here in the studio, Techonomy CEO David Kirkpatrick, also the author of The Facebook Effect. Great to see you in person today.
Good to be here.
David. Caroline, though, I want to start with you, laying out what exactly is behind the beefing up in staff here.
Well, it's interesting because we've heard as recently as back as May, but then more recently in June, that we were going to see a beefing up across the world of content control people that were going to be working on behalf of Facebook. They said they were going to be expanding it by some 3,000 new content control staff to beef it up to be 7,500 worldwide. Now, notably, most of these people tend to work in outsourcing companies, and this is what's going to be happening in Germany. 500 being added in the west of Germany. They've already got some 700 in the capital, Berlin, working for a different outsourcing company. And it's notable, as you mentioned, Germany's real vehement hatred for this hate speech. They have really been very tough legislatively, as you were hearing, but this is all after the very sad backlash that arose after the immigration crisis that occurred in 2015-2016, and you saw a lot of neo-Nazi sympathizers suddenly taking to social networks like Facebook to put their anti-immigration views across. This is why there is such focus to tackle this in Germany, notably as they got, of course, the key election about to happen in September.
David, what do you make of how Facebook is handling this issue now?
I think they're trying really hard to do the right thing. 7,500 sounds like a lot of people focused on this, but if there's 2 billion people on the platform, and let's face it, a good percentage of them, larger than we would like, are saying things periodically that are not very sociable, it's possibly going to take more than that. That's why they're also focusing very heavily on artificial intelligence as a way of surfacing the conversations and comments that maybe these 7,500 people ought to look at. I think focusing on Germany, though, is actually very smart for them because it is the country of all on the planet that is most sensitive to this issue, except maybe China for other reasons. And so I think they'll learn things there that they need to learn.
Caroline, are other countries going to be doing the same thing? Will we see this happening elsewhere?
I think this is really interesting. We have heard, particularly here in the United Kingdom and indeed in France, talk of potentially bringing in legislation themselves, fines themselves. Remember, this came after the terrible attacks that we saw in Manchester in the UK, in London, and of course the atrocities that we've seen occur over the past few years in Paris. Together, we saw France and the UK announce that they would be doing an anti-terror campaign. That was announced in June, and much of it was focused on, again, social networks, on Facebook. In fact, Sheryl Sandberg, who we'll be hearing from later with your interview, she came to the UK, spoke to Amber Rudd, who is the Home Secretary here, just a couple of months ago. And indeed, Amber Rudd's just been in Silicon Valley talking to the social networks and how they can crack down. But we've seen threats of legislation in UK and France. But really, it is Germany that has led the charge.
David, social networks, Facebook, Google, they have thousands of workers around the world, not just dealing with now, hateful content, but offensive content, inappropriate content.
Suicide risk.
They have been criticized for outsourcing this work, some of the hardest work, to other countries where maybe employees don't have the same protections. What do you make of that?
I don't know. I have never been a big critic of outsourcing. I think jobs are jobs, and people, if they're capable, should be allowed to do the work. And I think the one question in this instance is, does Facebook have sufficient control and guidance capabilities over the people who technically work for outsourcing companies? But I suspect they probably do. Those people, in many cases, are extremely talented, very well trained. It's really hard work. It's the kind of work, honestly, that a lot of Americans don't want to do, because it involves looking at things over and over again, looking at pornographic photos or looking at awful things. They talk about the need to give these people psychological counseling just in order to do the work. So I don't criticize them for using outsourcing firms. I criticize them maybe for not having enough people and making fast enough action, but I think they're trying. They just need to try harder, and they know that.
Caroline, what do we know about the resources that these employees are given, and what sort of, counseling or, psychological help that they're also receiving?
Well, concrete evidence is pretty few and far between, Emily. But what is interesting, I went back to the Post that announced all of this hiring in Germany today. And not once, not twice, but 3 times they mentioned the need for necessary support. They've clearly realized that there is this concern about, well, when people are basically staring into the abyss of human depravity, what sort of support can you give to these people from a psychological point of view? So they have spelled out time and again that they're going to be giving them counseling available. There is going to be plenty of training available. But as you say, these are people eventually hired by contractors. How much control will they actually have? The contractors are based in Germany. They will, of course, be working very closely in a network, it would seem. But it's hard to know exactly what sort of support systems these people will have.
David?
Well, here's a point.
We only have 30 seconds.
Okay, this shows how serious the problem is. In Germany, just in the German language, they're now going to have 1,200 of their 7,500 people. Think of all the other languages that are happening around the world, and if they were to have a proportionate number of people working on this problem in every language, it would be probably hundreds of thousands.
Right. It's a Herculean effort. All right, David Kirkpatrick, you're sticking with me. Caroline Hyde with us in London. Caroline, thanks so much for weighing in. Coming up, our exclusive conversation with Facebook Chief Operating Officer Sheryl Sandberg. As part of the interview, we talk about why companies should have a zero-tolerance policy for sexual harassment. This is Bloomberg. Sheryl Sandberg is going into her 10th year as Facebook's COO, having made a giant dent in the cultural zeitgeist with her book Lean In, a call to action for working women. When her husband, Dave Goldberg, CEO of SurveyMonkey, died unexpectedly in 2015, she wrote her second book, Option B. Now, in an exclusive interview, Sandberg has a new call to action to companies and their leaders as corporate policy continues to evolve.
I realized after I lost Dave is how badly we deal with grief, how badly we deal with not just finding what we need for ourselves, but really supporting each other. I realized that before I lost Dave, I had no idea how to handle a colleague who was going through something hard. What I would usually do is try to address it once, I'm so sorry for your loss, and then I would never mention it again. And after I lost Dave, I realized that even the basic pleasantries, how are you? To someone who just got diagnosed with cancer or lost a child, that can seem like a really insensitive question.
Do you feel like he's still teaching you, maybe teaching all of us?
Definitely. I mean, I try to remember what Dave would say. I try to remember the things, the way he looked at things. It gets harder as the years go on. I mean, certainly as a parent, specific situations, when I first lost him, I was closer to those, and now I face more situations with my kids that I don't have his opinion. But then I try to remember that I know what he really cared about. I know what he cared about for me and my children, our children, and I know what he cared about for people in the workplace. I've watched Sandra Lurie take on SurveyMonkey. I've watched them redefine their purpose around curiosity and how people use data to make decisions. I know how much Dave would like that. And I do, being on your show is emotional for me, because most of the time I ever saw you on your show was when I would watch him.
How has it changed how you lead?
It was something that really surprised me. I mean, I had thought about the fact that when you lose someone, you're sad or you're angry, the things people talk about, but what no one had ever talked about was the confidence loss. But then when it happened to me, it made sense. So when people said the kind of things to me that I used to say to people, which is, oh, of course you can't concentrate with all you're going through. In the days when I wanted to be at work, because being at home was horrific. Work was better once my kids went back to school. I had nothing else to do. Hearing, oh, of course you can concentrate, that really undercut my confidence even more. So now I have a different approach. I, of course, start with, do you need time off? But if someone's choosing to be at work, I then will not just say, oh, of course you can concentrate, but say, thank you for that contribution. Even the most basic compliment can really help someone who's facing a personal crisis, facing a cancer diagnosis, struggling with something in their personal life, because it tells them that you still think they can contribute.
I know Facebook has increased paid family leave, bereavement leave as a result of this. How has this shaped Facebook's culture?
Well, this is a really important conversation, not just for Facebook, but for all companies. I believe we need 21st century companies that make a 21st century commitment to employees.
What does that mean?
Well, what it means is that our public policy in this country is in a really bad place. We're the only developed country in the world to not have maternity leave. The only one. You know, we're one of the only countries in the world that doesn't have paid family medical leave. Companies have an opportunity and an obligation to step into the gap. And what's important for companies to understand is this isn't a trade-off between the right thing to do and the smart thing to do. This is both. I actually believe it will create the kind of companies that will outperform in a globally competitive environment.
Now, I know you've been quietly disseminating this philosophy around corporate openness and talking to other CEOs. What are you telling them?
Let's start with the policy side. We need better corporate policies, parental leave, both maternal and paternal, covering all forms of adopting a child and childbirth, equal for men and women. At Facebook, we offer 4 months, and we encourage people to take it. And Mark Zuckerberg set a great example himself. Paid family medical leave, so that people can take care of themselves and children. And bereavement leave. I didn't think much about bereavement leave until I lost Dave. And Facebook had really good policies in place, and we extended them even further. We now offer 20 days for someone who lost an immediate family member and 10 days for extended family members. I've been talking to a lot of CEOs and companies about extending their bereavement leave. MasterCard announced, and I was so happy to applaud them for it. SurveyMonkey, obviously close to my heart, have done it as well. And I'm hoping a lot more companies will step in and offer substantial and paid bereavement leave.
It's hard to leave any job for a period of time, but tech moves so fast. Are people taking the leave? Are dads taking the leave that they're given here?
We encourage dads to take the leave. I think one thing we do, which is a good policy, is we give those 4 months over the first year. And if you want to take it all up front as 4 months, that's great, and we're happy to encourage that. But some people actually have said, my mother or my mother-in-law is there for the first month, I want to do it a little bit later. So we're actually, one of the ways we encourage people to take the full leave is make even that leave really flexible.
This idea of openness, what if you work at a car company or a consulting firm or a company in China where it might be more difficult to create that kind of culture?
So I've been talking about emotion at work for a long time. I wrote in Lean In that I cry at work sometimes. That was reported as Sheryl Sandberg cries on Mark Zuckerberg's shoulder, which is not exactly what happened. But I wrote long before Lean In that I leave work at 5:30 so I can be home for dinner with my kids. The concept that we can be both hopefully great leaders, great managers, great contributors, but also great parents and wives and husbands and fathers and mothers and friends. I don't think these things trade off. I think they go together.
When you said you leave work at 5:30, someone else said you couldn't have gotten more publicity if you murdered someone with an axe.
With an axe, exactly.
I think it's fair, though, that you probably don't leave work behind at 5:30. The expectations of modern workers and modern parents are higher than ever. How do employers address that?
It's such a good point because the expectations are higher on both sides. And you're right. I mean, when my parents were in the workforce early days, there was no internet. You couldn't work at home, and now we can. And so I'm not pretending that I leave work at 5:30 and don't pick up work again. Of course I do. But the ability to go home, have dinner with my kids, put them to bed, and then work, to get up before they wake up and then work, gives me the flexibility I need to be home. I think we need to communicate well with our employees. Not everything is an emergency. I do send emails late at night. I have a system with the people I work for. I'm like, if it's important and I need an answer and it's the night or weekend, I will red flag it. If I don't red flag it, you can wait. And I want to set it up so that I can work the hours that make sense for me, but it's not forcing them to stay up after that late email to respond.
We'll have much more from our exclusive conversation with Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg. Coming up, we discuss the company's corporate culture and what changes could be on the way at Facebook. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. Britain's ambassador to the United Nations, Matthew Rycroft, says the UK fully supports the Trump administration's tough stance on North Korea's nuclear ambitions.
The United Kingdom stands shoulder to shoulder with the United States in tackling this threat and many others. We are united in calling on the North Korean regime to halt its nuclear program. The whole of the Security Council has come together behind that, and I think that we should see the President's public comments as one of the strands, one of the many strands of US activity.
Ambassador Rycroft added that the president's aggressive rhetoric on North Korea isn't hurting any chances for diplomacy. In the wake of international condemnation, North Korean authorities today arranged a giant rally as a show of collective support for their rejection of the UN's latest round of sanctions. People packed Kim Il-sung Square in downtown Pyongyang for the event. Amnesty International is urging Kenyan authorities not to use force unnecessarily while responding to protests and opposition claims of vote rigging. The Associated Press reports at least 3 people have been shot. Incumbent President Uhuru Kenyatta reportedly holds the lead as vote counting continues. A spokesman for Paul Manafort says the former Trump campaign manager is cooperating with the FBI. That's after word that agents raided his Virginia home last month and collected material during the search. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. here in New York, 7:30 Thursday morning in Sydney. I'm joined by my colleague Paul Allen with a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. Let's start with the New Zealand dollar, which is fractionally higher against the greenback. This after the Reserve Bank of New Zealand held the country's cash rate at 1.75%, expecting to keep it there for some time on a weak inflation outlook. Around the markets, Nikkei futures looking mixed at the moment. Toshiba confirms it will submit first quarter and full year 2016 reports by today's deadline. Japan Post also reporting. Here in Australia, we've got ASX futures slightly higher as we wait on on the airline Virgin Australia to report its full-year result, expecting its 5th consecutive loss there. And Noble Group, the commodities supply chain, also expected to report second quarter results after the bell. $1.8 billion loss expected there, and that is more than Noble's market valuation. Elsewhere, also waiting on China Mobile first half earnings. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Let's return to our exclusive conversation with Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg. At Facebook, like many tech companies in Silicon Valley, it's competitive, but with high reward and benefits for employees, right down to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In an age where companies already expect so much of their staff, I asked Sandberg if there's a downside.
Well, we try to offer things, but we don't require it. We offer dinner, but no one's required to come for dinner. And there are people who take their dinner in a box for their commute home or for when they get home. I think companies have an obligation to do what they can for employees, and that also means contractors. So we did something 2 years ago, which was, I think, a pretty unprecedented step, which is we announced that we were going to make sure all of our contractors who worked at companies of a certain size, that we could have these deals with them, get paid a minimum wage of $15 per hour in the United States and get paid leave. And that's something more companies can do. I recognize the margins we have and that we are able to do more. But I think almost all companies could stretch to do more for their employees and offer as much as they can. Again, I think this is the 21st century commitment we need to the people who work for us, and that includes contractors.
The gig economy is changing the way we work. Uber drivers and all different kinds of more flexible work. How do we take care of those workers on a policy level?
I think corporate leaders need to think about leave policies and pay policies, not just for their employees, but for their contractors. And we did that a few years ago, and I encourage other people to do it. Let's talk about public policy, right? Only country in the world, a developed country, that doesn't offer paid maternity leave. Let's talk about family medical leave. There's a really good bill out there. It's the Family Act, Senator Gillibrand and Congresswoman DeLauro. It's a good bill. It offers 12 weeks. It covers men and women. It offers substantial wage reimbursement and replacement, and it covers all forms of needing leave. That's the kind of public policy we need. There's some progress at the state level. Washington State last month became the 5th state to offer a really good paid leave policy. But I don't think we can fully rely on companies, even though mostly companies are watching this, and I hope all of them do as much as they can.
Right.
We need strong national policy.
Apple built a brand spanking new campus with a 100,000 square foot gym, no childcare. Much was made of that in the press. Tech companies have never shied away from radical solutions to hard problems. Should companies with the resources of Apple and Facebook offer things like childcare?
Childcare is often complicated in the sense that a lot of companies that offer it directly have long wait lists, and a lot of places aren't zoned for it, so you don't have the option to do on-site childcare. So I've talked to a lot of companies who have different ways of dealing with it, but here's what every company should make sure is that employees are paid enough that they can afford good childcare, whether that childcare is offered on campus, which is obviously great if you can do it, or that childcare is offered elsewhere. Employees have the flexibility that when a child is sick, they're not worried about losing their jobs. And we know that in people who are employees of companies like Apple and Facebook, those companies are more likely to be able to provide those things than other companies, and that's why we need to think about all of the workers.
I'm curious how the message of option B and corporate openness aligns with the message of lean in. Sharing is great, but can sharing hurt women more?
Let's be clear. there are double standards, I'm sure, men don't really cry in the office, but if they did, I would applaud them. But if people who've ever had a son and a daughter, I did, turns out those babies cry the same amount. As adults, women cry more than men. We socialize that. And I think our culture needs to change because we're holding both men and women back. I really believe that the best leaders and managers do not shy away from emotion, but embrace it. Now, that doesn't mean we spend all day kumbayaing in a circle with tears. No one's saying that. But it does mean that when someone has lost a child, how are you today? I'm thinking of you. What can I do to help you? And on the way out of a meeting, are you sure you want to be here? But you know what? You made a great point. That is how you use EQ combined with IQ to be a great manager. I think the best managers are doing it, and more can.
There's been an explosion of stories about sexual harassment in Silicon Valley. VCs have lost their jobs. The CEO of Uber has resigned. Are you surprised by this?
I mean, I'm hugely disappointed. Look, sexual harassment has been around for a long time in every industry. It's abominable that it still exists in this day and age. People know better. I think it's great when people lose their jobs when it happens, because I think that is what will get people to not do it in the future. And I think this is a leadership challenge. As a leader of a company, there needs to be no tolerance for it. Full stop. No tolerance.
Look,
no one should go to work and face this.
What's your advice to the next leader of Uber?
I think people respond to what's tolerated and what's encouraged. And I think a great leader can change the culture of, I think, almost any company in almost any situation. You put in new policies, you have new procedures, your language is different. I'm always optimistic.
One Uber investor told me he would die to have you in that spot, and I'm sure even more so after hearing that answer. Why not?
Because I love Facebook. I really do. I love my job. I love our new mission about building community, and I love the community that is this company. I get to do something I deeply believe in with one of my best friends in the world, Mark Zuckerberg, all day. But there are a lot of great people out there who can lead Uber and lots of other companies in ways that don't just prevent sexual harassment, because that's a basic. We could do better.
Part of the problem in tech is that it is still male-dominated. Despite your leadership on this topic, has it been harder to change the ratio than you thought?
Our numbers are still low. They're low for women, they're low for underrepresented minorities, and that's something that's a problem because it's hurting us. Diverse teams make better decisions. We are having some success on the business side of the company. Our company is more than half women on the business side, and I'm proud of that. On the tech side, it remains a struggle. And there are 16% of computer science graduates today that are women, compared to 35% in the 1980s when the field was smaller. Blacks and Hispanics are not represented in computer science. In order to hire computer scientists, we have to persuade more women and underrepresented minorities to go into computer science. We take that really seriously at Facebook. We have a large Facebook internship program, and we hire people who are computer scientists of all backgrounds. We started going earlier in the program. We created Facebook University, tried to find women and underrepresented minorities who we thought could be great in computer science but weren't yet in the field or were just starting in the field, so we could get them earlier and invest in them and try to keep them in. We have a very large computer science and engineering lean-in circle program. We do it with LinkedIn and my foundation and Facebook, trying to get women to feel that they have peers right from the beginning. If you go to a computer science class but you don't have enough women in there, well, if you can be in a lean-in circle of computer scientists where you're seeing more women, and we need to do more because we're still not moving the numbers enough.
Much more of our exclusive conversation with Sheryl Sandberg coming up. We discuss Mark Zuckerberg's latest mission across the U.S. This is Bloomberg. With 2 billion global users, Facebook is no longer just about connecting the world, but bringing it even closer together. That's according to CEO Mark Zuckerberg, who recently went on tour around the U.S. as part of a personal challenge to visit all 50 states. In our exclusive interview with Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg, I asked about this new mission.
Mark wanted to make sure he'd gone to all the states. And, you know, it was interesting because when I first came to Facebook, Mark told me he had never really gotten to travel that much, right? He started the company before he graduated from college. And so he took a trip then where he could see different parts of the world. And I think he really realized he hadn't even understood and seen his own country. And I think what he's learned and experienced has been really important for Facebook because it's helping inform our products. When he rolled out a new mission of being community-based, empowering communities, that was coming from a deep place of experience of what he was seeing was being found and being lost in communities. Mark and I think all the people that work here, we know we have a very big responsibility. And we want Facebook to help do good in the world. We always have. And I think Mark having that direct experience base is helping us build the products that will build community.
Facebook's new mission is not just to connect the world, but to bring people closer together, as you say, through groups. Do you think groups are the future of Facebook?
I think groups are important because they're bringing people together. They are one product manifestation of a community.
Mark's talked about concerns about isolation and nationalism that have risen despite Facebook's efforts to connect the world. And groups coalesce around like-minded views and interests. You think Facebook's part of the solution, but is it also part of the problem?
Well, any technology that's ever been invented has been used for good and sometimes used for bad. And we work really hard to make sure the bad is not on Facebook. I think groups are helpful. I think groups bring people together on different issues. And you actually see a lot of groups that are pretty broad. One of the women I met with has a group bringing women of Muslim and Jewish faith together. So very much on purpose, bringing people together. And there are a lot of groups that serve the purpose of bringing people who wouldn't otherwise connect together online. And that's one of the powers of technology. A huge part of our user base has a cross-border connection. And I think about that in my own life. When I was, in high school or college, I didn't know anyone who didn't live in our country. I grew up in Miami. I barely knew anyone who wasn't from Miami. But if I were on Facebook now, growing up, I'd probably have a cross-border friend. I'd probably have a friend on Facebook from another country.
Would you ever consider showing people news or information from the other side of the aisle? Like, what are people who think differently than me thinking?
And we do that. I think people worry that Facebook, puts you in a news feed that's all the people have the same views as you. That's not what happens. Because of Facebook, you can hear from more voices. And on average, by extending to more voices, you actually see broader views than you otherwise would see. Now, that doesn't mean everyone's being blasted by views from the other side all day. They're not. But on average, Facebook broadens the views. I still think we all can do more to learn more about what other people think and what their experiences are.
WhatsApp is now partially blocked in China. Is Mark's dream of connecting the world now highly unlikely?
We've always said the whole world includes China, and Facebook remains blocked there.
Mark told our friend David Kirkpatrick that Facebook is more like a government than a traditional company, and probably even more so now at this scale. How does Facebook manage the scope of its policy, media, and all of these different responsibilities in this modern age?
Well, we try to do it by empowering local teams. We know we're not going to get everything right from Menlo Park. So with public policy, we've hired local teams on the ground. We have extraordinary leaders around the world, and they make sure we understand what's going on in those countries. We are not perfect. With so many people posting to Facebook, we make mistakes. We're trying to address those mistakes quickly and correct them. We're also really investing in community operations. We're hiring another 3,000 people to work with our community. That's a pretty serious investment for us, and hiring them all around the world. We want to try to get the policies right, get there quickly, and make sure we're staffed so that we can be as responsive as possible.
If Facebook is more like a government than a company, what's your role?
Well, we're a company. We're a company that's broadly used. We have responsibility and deep responsibility to the people who use us to put out a product and service that enables them to share and keeps harmful things from happening. We have a responsibility to the people that use our products. When they report something, we try to get to it as quickly as possible. And we have a responsibility to build teams around the world that have empathy for local users. And that's what we're trying to do.
Facebook is pushing forward with artificial intelligence. You're hiring 3,000 people to help moderate content. Ultimately, someday, though, this is a job technology might be able to do. What do you see as the impact of automation on the human worker?
Automation's had very profound impacts for workers. And we know that, right? I mean, I am old enough to remember when you used to get money from a bank and when you used to check in with a person to an airline ticket. And so we see how automation is taking jobs that would have been done across lots of industries. Technology can also be used to grow jobs. So we have 70 million small businesses that use Facebook on a monthly basis, and we just announced that we have 15 million small businesses using Instagram on a monthly basis. These are mostly non-tech businesses that are using the power of technology to find their customers and build their businesses. We study our impact on the economy regularly, and we care about the millions of jobs that we create, and we work really hard to help small businesses use technology to help them thrive, and importantly, not just tech businesses, but all businesses.
Facebook is making a huge push into video, and some say Facebook might become more like a competitor to YouTube. How do you hope this changes the perception of what Facebook is?
It's really technological advancement. 4 years ago, if you tried to post a video, you couldn't. And if you tried to watch a video, it buffered and it was super annoying. And today, video is exploding because the technology is there. And so what we're doing is making sure people can share and consume content in any way they want. And so video is an important part of that.
Facebook has taken on many of Snapchat's most popular ideas. They say imitation is the highest form of flattery, but Evan Spiegel may not feel that way. Do you think there's room for another social network in the Facebook empire?
Mobile time is exploding. People are using more and more mobile time. People are using more and more social time. I remember interviewing with Mark for this job almost 10 years ago, and him saying that more things were going to be social. Well, that's what's happening. And there's certainly room for lots of companies to offer lots of great services.
I've heard you talk about how much you enjoy visiting lean-in circles and hearing other women talk about the challenges they're taking on. What new challenges do you want to take on?
I feel fully challenged. Facebook just hit 2 billion users around the world. We know how deep our responsibility is, and I love working with Mark and the team here on that. I'm glad I wrote Option B. It was a very emotional thing to do, but I think it was important. And if it helps just one person, then that gives Dave's life a little more meaning, and that has all the meaning in the world for me.
Would you ever run for office?
No. Staying at Facebook.
Okay. Got it. You've been here 9 years. What are you most proud of, and what's one thing you still hope to do?
I'm most proud of our teams around the world. The people I work with every day at Facebook believe in our mission. They work so hard to get it right. They correct when they need to, and they're building products that we're proud of, and I'm proud of them, and I'm grateful that I'm on this team. And I think there's a lot we still need to get right. We still need to build products and services that help people connect and share in really authentic ways, and we're going to continue working hard at that.
All right, Sheryl Sandberg, Facebook COO, thank you so much for joining us.
Our exclusive conversation there with Sheryl Sandberg. For a reaction, I want to bring in Techonomy CEO David Kirkpatrick. You've known Sheryl for a very long time. I know you were curious to hear her answers to some of those questions. What'd you think?
Well, there are few more polished public speakers in business, but I also think there are extremely few business leaders who can talk with as much sensitivity and depth about the human issues and the way human issues intersect with business leadership. She is truly eloquent about that stuff. I mean, how many other business leaders have written 2 books about, social development for women and emotional reaction to a death? And, she is an unusual person. This is a company with 2 leaders who have very, very, very sophisticated and high values that I think really are unusual in business, period. I mean, they have an unbelievable challenge running that company, which, as you try to get at in the interview, is a unique entity with its scale of influence globally and a challenge unlike any business has ever really had. I don't think they even yet know how they're going to handle all that, but she is an extraordinary leader, and it comes through loud and clear. And congrats for a great interview.
Well, thank you, David Kirkpatrick. As always, great to have you here. I think you're sticking around for one more block. Coming up, Snap reports earnings after the bell on Thursday. What Wall Street wants to see from the company next. This is Bloomberg. The parent company of Snapchat has taken investors for a wild ride since its March public trading debut. So what does Wall Street want to see from the maker of disappearing messages in its earnings results out Thursday? Bloomberg Tech's Sarah Fryer takes a look.
Investors will have their sights set for signs of growth in Snapchat's core audience. Snap's growth over the last 6 quarters has stagnated. Also adding to the apprehension, Instagram. Since it copied the Snap-styled 24-hour disappearing stories feature last year, it's been able to grow even more quickly. Instagram daily users for stories hit 250 million, surpassing Snapchat's 166 million. That milestone only added fuel to concerns about whether Snap can compete with a juggernaut like Facebook. Shares of Snap have plummeted over 20% since the company's debut. So what will they have to do to prove themselves?
They need to re-accelerate the DAU growth, daily average user growth. It's the same thing with Twitter. If the users decline, the stock will decline. Now, Snap needs to get that growth rate re-accelerating, and then they've rolled out a self-service advertising solution, so they need to do that to get more advertisers on the network and cause their ad revenue growth to stabilize.
But it doesn't seem like Snap is prioritizing daily active active user growth. Their strategy is to focus on quality rather than quantity. The company will aim to show that it is generating more revenue from existing users. Therefore, that would allow sales to go up even if its user base doesn't significantly increase. But that hasn't been enough to convince Wall Street to measure them any differently than Facebook. Sarah Fryer, Bloomberg News, San Francisco.
On Thursday's show, we will have complete coverage and analysis of those results from Snap. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. This is Bloomberg. We'll see you tomorrow.